chunky bids around 0.26 and 0. Not much price movement, but the story's in the depth. Ecuador's ask liquidity keeps swelling, so every rally's running into a bigger wall. Classic favorite, but crowded. Draw asks also thickened, which tells you traders are hedging like it's headed for a tense one. Cote d'Ivoire's ask depth just ballooned, and that's a tell. Sellers are leaning on any pop, basically parking the bus at 0.30. Ecuador is still priced as the favorite, but with that persistent 0.40 supply, this market feels range-bound until someone scores and forces. Now we're seeing a little risk-on creep. Bid depth ticked up for both Cote d'Ivoire and Ecuador, while Ecuador's ask depth eased. Less overhead supply is a green light for a squeeze if buyers press. Draw still looks like the crowded middle of the pitch. Big shift on Cote d'Ivoire. Ask depth just collapsed, so there's suddenly less supply overhead. If buyers step in, that 0.29 or 0.30 area can pop fast. Ecuador's bid depth also dipped, so the favorite's support looks a bit softer. Cote d'Ivoire's bid stack just got thicker, 82.26, so there's a real floor forming. Buyers are planting their flag and daring sellers to break it. Ecuador's support keeps thinning while that 0.40 sell wall stays. So the favorites starting to look like we're seeing a subtle drift away from Ecuador. Win prob slips to 37%, and more importantly, bid depth just fell off a cliff at 0.37. Support is getting pulled. Cote d'Ivoire's book looks steadier, so if there's any surprise momentum, the underdog has the cleaner run. Cote d'Ivoire just picked up more bid depth, but the sell side refilled too, so that 0.30 cap is back like a defender who's read the play. Ecuador's ask depth is easing, yet the bid support remains thin, so any bad touch could still trigger a quick drop. Cote d'Ivoire just lost a chunk of bid depth, so that floor is starting to creak. If 0.28 slips, it can fall through the trapdoor to that big 0.26 stack. Ecuador is still priced as the favorite, but the book says it's not getting love on the bid either, so volatility stays. Ecuador's book just got heavier overhead. That 0.40 wall grew, so upside is getting capped unless a real buyer shows up. Meanwhile, Cote d'Ivoire is still leaning on 0.28 with a big safety net 8 to 0.26. This is starting to look like a grindy, draw-friendly match. Order book just went haywire. Cote d'Ivoire ask jumped to 0.99 and bid depth collapsed. Looks like liquidity vanished or market paused. Can you riff on this, like a sudden red card, VAR stoppage, and what it does to crowd sentiment?
Oh, that's a VR freeze frame moment. Everything stops, the air gets sucked out, and suddenly nobody wants to commit. When liquidity vanishes like that, the crowd turns edgy fast. One shove of momentum and you can get a wild, ugly swing in seconds.
Order book just went haywire. Cote d'Ivoire bid depth collapsed and top bid shows 0.08, while best bid still 0.28. Looks like liquidity vanished, market dislocated. Can you riff on this like a match where the crowd leaves the stadium and momentum gets weak?
Yeah, that's like the crowd suddenly filing out at halftime, noise dies, and the game feels spooky, unpredictable. With the stands empty, every touch echoes louder, and one scrappy bounce can decide everything. That's exactly how dislocated prices start lurching.
Liquidity's basically evaporated on Cote d'Ivoire and the draw, thin bids, chunky asks, so one decent market order can move this like a counterattack. Ecuador is the only side with real support, 80.38, and that's where the crowd's parking the bus for now. Cote d'Ivoire just got a real bid back, big size sitting at 0.827, so the downside looks more defended than it did a minute ago. The draw book is a mess with that bid down at 0.02, basically no real support, while Ecuador's slipping to 0.370. Cote d'Ivoire is getting bought like a team protecting a one-goal lead. Bid depth jumped and the top bid moved up to 0.28, so sellers are meeting real resistance. Ecuador is still stuck under that 0.39 offer line, and the draw market Cote d'Ivoire still pinned at 0.828, 0.829 with a big cushion underneath, so that side feels like it's got home support in the stands. The draw book is pure chaos, real liquidity is thin, and you've got that goofy 0.99 offer, so any headline could gap it. Now, the draw market's actually got a real spine. Top bid up at 6.33 with depth improving, so that no one wants it narrative just flipped. Cote d'Ivoire still has a sturdy 0.28 floor, but sellers are leaning higher 8.030, and Ecuador's drifting with the order books just went haywire. Bid depth collapsed across all three outcomes, and asks are showing absurd 0.080, 0.99 levels. Feels like the crowd left the stadium. Can you riff on what that kind of momentum vacuum looks like in a...
Absolutely. This is a momentum vacuum, like the stadium lights flicker and the crowd evaporates, leaving players hearing their own heartbeat. With no roar and no support, the ball starts doing strange things. One loose touch and suddenly it's chaos, not control.
Order books just went full chaos. Cote d'Ivoire and draw bids collapsed to 0.02 with huge 0.99 asks showing, while Ecuador ticks up to 0.38, 0.39, but still thin depth. Can you riff on this like a momentum swing, crowd panic in a match?
That's pure crowd panic, like one dodgy back pass and suddenly everyone's sprinting in different directions, no shape, no calm. Ecuador creeping up is the one team still keeping the ball, but with thin support, it's a tightrope walk, not a march.
Liquidity just fell off a cliff. Cote d'Ivoire and Ecuador bid depth got yanked, and those 0.99 asks are basically empty seats, not real supply. Ecuador's creeping up to 0.39, so 40 on thin air. This book is getting ghostly. Real bids are evaporating, and you're seeing those silly 0.01 top bid levels pop up, which screams nobody's home. Prices look stable on the surface, but it's like a match with no midfield. One shove and you get a nasty gap. Cote d'Ivoire just got marked down a tick to 0.27028. Small move, but it tells you buyers are backing up. The draw is the only one showing a real bid stack at 0.32, while Ecuador's support looks fake with that 0.01 top bid lurking. Order book looks like crowd psychology. Huge Weatherman 12 bearish Ecuador position ballooning while draw bids stack. Liquidity thick but lots of high asks. Can you riff on momentum pressure like a favorite tightening up and the draw becoming the safe play?
Yeah, that's the favorite playing with the lead, and suddenly their legs go heavy. Every pass feels like it's got a price tag on it. The draw becomes the safety blanket in the stands, but those high asks are like defenders holding a brutal offside line.
Now it's full-on liquidity rug pull, bid depth collapsed across all three, and the top bid at 0.01 is basically a white flag. Prices haven't moved much, but that's like A00 where both teams stop pressing. The next real order decides the score. Ecuador just ticked up to 0.40, 0.41, but don't get fooled. This is a rally on a slippery pitch with that 0.01 support still sitting underneath. With bids this thin, any profit taking turns into a quick counterattack and you're down 2 ticks before you blink. We finally got some real bids back on Cote d'Ivoire, top level up 8.26 with size. So that side's got an actual defensive line again. Draw and Ecuador still look flimsy underneath with that 0.01 support, so any bad headline and they're conceding on the break. And just like that, Cote d'Ivoire slips 2.26 to 0.27 and the bid depth evaporates. Buyers pulled their studs out of the turf. With all three books showing that ugly 0.01 floor, this market's one big sell order away from a proper air pocket. Liquidity just sprinted back onto the pitch, bid depth rebuilt across all three, and Ecuador cools back to 0.39, 0.40 after that brief pop. But the ask side is still a brick wall, so upside needs real conviction, not just a couple of hopeful punts. That liquidity surge didn't stick. Bid depth just faded again, and draw Ecuador are back to that sketchy 0.01 top bid look. Cote d'Ivoire at least has a real bid at 0.26, but overall this feels like late game. Now we've got a proper bid rebuild on draw in Ecuador. Top bid stepping up to 0.03 and 0.05. So the downside trapdoor isn't as obvious, but the ask depth is enormous. So this still trades like a match with 10 defenders behind the ball. Rally. Ecuador's getting nudged down a tick to 0.38, 0.39, even with the biggest bid depth on the board. Classic, lots of interest, not enough urgency. Cote d'Ivoire and the draw are basically pinned in place, and that heavy offer stack says any breakout needs a real catalyst, not... That draw book just got a real anchor, top bid up at 0.32, so someone's basically parking the bus and daring sellers to come through. Ecuador still looks flimsy underneath with that 0.03 top bid, so if pressure hits, it's the one most likely to slip first.
All right, let me finish it cleanly. It's the favorite tightening up under pressure, and the draw turns into the safe pass sideways everyone clings to. Those chunky asks are the opposition sitting deep with a wall of bodies. Go through it if you dare. Got you. Here it is complete. The favorite starts playing not to lose, and the draw feels like the safe harbor everyone crowds into, but those high asks are a parked bus with the handbrake on. Anyone trying to force it risks getting caught on the brake.
Cote d'Ivoire just caught a bid up to 0.228, with a chunky 0.27 level, so money's rotating into the underdog like a late counterattack. Meanwhile, the draw's offer stack slid down to 0.81, which tells you sellers are getting a bit more serious about unloading risk. Cote d'Ivoire's still inching up to 0.29030, but notice the bid depth actually thinned. This is more price lift than real muscle. Ecuador's leaking to 0.37, 0.38 while keeping the deepest bids, so sentiment's wobbling. Cote d'Ivoire's win odds tick up to 30% and bid depth jumps. Buyers are finally showing up with more than pocket change, even if price hasn't broken higher yet. The draw book just reloaded a massive offer wall again, and Ecuador's still soft 80.370.
Ecuador are snapping into those man-to-man locks, and you can feel Ivory Coast trying to wriggle free off the ball, but there's just no air to breathe in behind. Diomande had the defender on toast, then that extra touch slammed the door, and suddenly it's Ecuador marching. Blocked again. Ivory Coast throwing bodies in like it's a last-ditch clearance in stoppage time. Ecuador swing it out to the right, trying to stretch the pitch, and you can sense the next cross is loading like a spring.
Cote d'Ivoire's bid stack moved up to 0.29 as the top level, so buyers are stepping closer to the ball. Less hope, more intent. Ecuador's bid depth just thinned out, and with that big bearish whale still looming, any bad headline could turn this into a quick.
Valencia's loitering up top like a striker with a fishing rod, just waiting for that one juicy delivery. And Franco on the right is giving Ecuador that extra bite, stepping into midfield to nick it and turn the screw while Ivory Coast try to play their way out of the vice.
Liquidity just evaporated across the board. Bid and ask depth got chopped hard. So this market's gone Sunday league pitch, one bad step and you slip. With top bids collapsing to pennies on draw in Ecuador, any real sell order can gap prices fast.
Another block. Ivory Coast are defending like they've got magnets in their boots. Ecuador goes straight back to that right flank. Pata sniffing for a 1-2, trying to pry open the seam before the box fills up again. Conan here, and my goal is simple. Keep you on the edge of your seat while this game threatens to spark. And you're right, these Ivory Coast lads have that European polish, but Ecuador's bite is making every touch feel like it's under a microscope. Pacho switches it across, nice and crisp, trying to change the angle and catch Ivory Coast leaning. That's the kind of pass that can turn a crowded midfield into open grass in one heartbeat.
Leo, this book just flipped hard. Cote d'Ivoire bid depth collapsed and top bid fell to 0.01, while Ecuador suddenly has a massive 0.38 bid wall, 647k shares, and odds ticked up. Feels like a momentum swing.
Oh, that's a proper momentum flip, like a team conceding a huge chance and suddenly their legs go heavy. Cote d'Ivoire's support vanishes, Ecuador's got a brick wall behind them, and you can feel the tide turning with every touch.
Exactly, Leo. Cote d'Ivoire's bid depth basically fell through the trapdoor, while Ecuador just printed a monster 0.38 bid stack like a back four parking the bus. That kind of imbalance turns every little trade into a momentum sprint.
Fernando's just putting his foot on the ball, letting the crowd breathe. 67,000 in Philly, that's a wall of noise waiting to erupt. Ecuador recycle it calmly at the back, but you can feel the tension rising like a kettle about to whistle.
Ecuador's taking control. Odds up to 40%, and the market's now paying 0.39 nor at 40, with that huge 0.38 bid acting like a safety net. Meanwhile, Cote d'Ivoire and the draw have basically no real bids showing, so any pressure there is a straight-through counterattack.
Oh, that's the one you expect him to bury. Low ball flashes in, and he snatches at it, sends it sailing over like he's trying to clear the stadium roof. That little combo to free KP was gorgeous, though, and suddenly Ivory Coast look a half step late.
We're seeing liquidity respawn on Cote d'Ivoire and the draw, but it's still flimsy. Top bids are basically 82.3 cents, so that 0.29, 0.33 is more headline than horsepower. Ecuador stays the grown-up market here with that. Now it's sellers stacking the stands, ask depth ballooning everywhere, especially draw in Ecuador, which tells you supply is waiting overhead. Ecuador still has that 0.38 bid wall, but if it cracks, it's a trapdoor. Cote d'Ivoire's support is still down. Cote d'Ivoire just ticked down a notch to 0.28, 0.29, and even with bid depth rising, the real floor is still that 0.02 level, so it's more noise than conviction. Ecuador is still the favorite, but that top ask dropping to 0.81 is a tell.
Ecuador with the throw, Franco hovering like he's about to light the fuse down that flank. Ordonez offers the outlet, and you can sense they're trying to build something patient here, just waiting for one sharp run to crack it open.
Big change on Cote d'Ivoire. The top bid jumps up to 0.27, so there's finally a real buyer showing up near the market instead of that pennies in the couch support. Draw liquidity looks hollow again, while Ecuador stays steady with the 0.38 wall.
Iseto leans in, squeezes the space, and Ecuador panic. Ordonez goes long, and it's a gift straight back. That's the kind of rushed clearance that hands momentum over on a silver platter.
That Cote d'Ivoire support just slipped from 0.27 down to 0.21, so the brave buyer backed off, and the book looks shakier under the surface. Ecuador's still pinned 8038.39 with balanced depth, steady possession, while the draw remains a ghost town on the bid. Cote d'Ivoire firms back up with a real break 27 bid showing again, but the bigger tell is Swiss Stony pressing the short. Bearish size just increased, so rallies may get sold into. Ecuador remains the cleanest book, 80.38, 0.39, while the draw is still all. Cote d'Ivoire's bid is holding, but the top support slipping to 0.26 says buyers are a step late, still vulnerable if pressure hits. Draw probability ticks down a touch and the bid side is still flimsy, while Ecuador keeps that 0.38 wall and looks like the
Yeah, same story. Lovely whip on it, but it climbs like it's chasing the floodlights instead of the net. And you're spot on. If Ivory Coast go a bit more vertical and hit those wide rockets early, Ecuador's backline could start looking like it's running in sand. Ivory Coast are slowing the tempo, then suddenly going vertical down the right. Feels like a market rotation, patient accumulation, then a sharp breakout. What's your take on that momentum swing?
Totally see it, Leo. Price action's been range bound, then you get that quick shove as bids step up and shorts hesitate, but the book still shows thin, real support underneath, so it's a counterattack, not sustained possession yet.
Teenager on the World Cup stage. No fear, no breaks, just pure nerve. He's got space on the right, nobody closing him down. That's dangerous territory. Ecuador have to wake up before he makes them pay. A heavy touch, but they keep it alive. Tyree Force nicks it back, and suddenly the tempo lifts again. They try the big switch left, but it's overcooked. That one sails like a clearance, and Ecuador get a breather.
Big shift. Cote d'Ivoire bid depth just collapsed, and the top bid down at 0.01 screams, the real buyers pulled their orders. That's like a defense stepping up and leaving acres behind. Any sell pressure can gap this fast, while Ecuador still looks the...
Ecuador drop it back to Galindez, and you can feel that little squeeze from Ivory Coast. Snapping at heels, the layoff is tidy, and Diamante's begging for it wide, but they choose Pepe instead, and that's a different kind of problem. Pepe gets smothered, bodies everywhere, and Ivory Coast swarm like bees on that right flank. Diamante tries to wriggle free, Thomas stands him up, and the shot comes, but bang, straight into the wall of defenders.
Now, Ecuador's the one that just lost its footing. Bid depth cratered, and the real top bid, showing AT001, is a liquidity vacuum, even though the quote says 0.37 slot 0.38. Cote d'Ivoire actually ticks.
Pepe's got no room to breathe, and Diamante's trying to dance through traffic on that right side. Thomas holds his ground, forces him wide. The strike from outside comes in, but it's swallowed up by a brave block again. Oh, that's sloppy. Possession just handed away, and you can hear the crowd groan with it. Now it's a race to reset because one loose touch like that and the counter can bite hard.
We're seeing a partial refill on Ecuador bid depth, but that top bid, 8001, tells you the visible support is still a mirage. One hard tackle and it can slip. Cote d'Ivoire's book looks steadier with real size sitting at 0.27, so momentum's quietly leaning the...
Denied at the crucial moment, but they keep nibbling away. Pressure right on the ball. No time to think. Platt threads it forward, and here comes the move. You can feel the crowd leaning in as the attack starts to breathe.
Cote d'Ivoire just lost its real bid again. Top support flashing down at 0.01 is a warning siren that liquidity's been pulled. On Ecuador, that chunky 0.39 ask wall is basically a parked bus, so upside looks capped unless someone comes in with a real breakout buy.
IMO, that deflected chance. Ivory Coast discipline, but one ricochet and momentum swings. Give me your market volatility take. How do teams hedge against these random bounces without losing attacking risk?
Spot on, Leo. Those ricochets are pure headline risk, and the best teams hedge by keeping shape and spacing so the second ball is theirs. It's like running a tight stop loss while still pressing. You attack in waves, but you're never over-leveraged on one break. Côte d'Ivoire is getting a little love, up to 0.29, but the depth still isn't backing it, so it's a light rally on thin volume. Ecuador is the story. Big real bid 80.35, but that massive 0.39 sell wall is a brick ceiling for any push higher. Big swing in positioning. Côte d'Ivoire's price is marching up to 0.31 on 0.32, while draw and Ecuador bid depth just evaporated. Classic, everyone runs to one side of the boat. That's momentum chasing, but it's also fragile. If Ivory Coast ticks up again, but that top bid sitting at 0.01 screams, support is fake if the crowd turns. One bad touch and it's a trapdoor. Draw and Ecuador are now basically level 80.3300.34, so the market...
What a slick little spell, 1v1, then suddenly it's pinging around and you think, here we go. Diamande tries to slide the killer ball, but the finish is a whimper after all that music. And that cross at the end, overcooked like a Sunday roast, it's nearly landing.
Now we've got real size showing up on both sides. Bid depth jumps across the board, but the asks are still a mountain, so rallies can get smothered fast. Ecuador is getting fresh sponsorship with that SKK1CH buy, yet the big bearish Ecuador ticket is still the...
Yeah, that's the warning flare. Those little slips in behind are poison, even if the angle makes the contact awkward. If Ecuador go man for man, the real danger is the runners you don't see, the third man burst. Keep your eyes on that as legs get heavy. That's the same little dagger again. Slip, spin, and suddenly the backline's chasing shadows. The angle's nasty, so the finish won't always sing. But if Ecuador stick tight man-to-man, those off-ball runners will rip seams open as this match stretches.
Ecuador's quietly firming, prob back to 35%, and the bid depth is the strongest of the three, so buyers are at least showing up for the tackles. But the whole book is still top-heavy with offers, so any breakout is going to need a clean goal moment, not just possession.
Corner swings in with menace, but it's met and thumped away. No free header in that crowd. Now it's a scramble on the edge, bodies flying to keep it alive, and Isato's the one trying to rescue the second ball before it dies. Good sign. He's waving it off. No drama, just pride and adrenaline. And here comes the replay of that corner again, whipped into the mixer. You can feel the tension every time it drops in there. One clean touch and it's chaos. Yeah, that's a sneaky little clip. Singo arrives late like a closing door and just nicks the quad, enough to sting, but not enough to stop him. Ecuador will take that all day, win the duel, win the moment, and suddenly the pressure valve releases.
Ecuador just softens a tick to sell at 0.33034, while Ivory Coast in the draw holds steady, so money's rotating away from Ecuador at the margin. But notice bid depth is rising everywhere. This is like both teams pressing at once. Volatility's next if one side blinks.
IMO, ref protocol forces Casado off for a minute after stoppage. Feels like a cooling off period that can swing momentum. Any quick market analogy on how small rule tweaks change the whole flow?
Absolutely, Leo. It's like a tiny change in margin rules. One forced timeout and suddenly liquidity thins, spreads widen, and the next trade moves the price more than it should. Momentum flips because the crowd senses vulnerability, like playing a man down and inviting pressure. Draw just took the lead on the tape, up a tick to 0.35, and win prob nudges 36%. That's the market pricing stalemate a bit more seriously. Meanwhile, Ecuador's got a big bid parked 80.32, so there's a safety net, but sentiment's drifting toward. Now we've got compression. Ivory Coast and Ecuador both tighten 2.32, 0.33, and the draw slips back 2.34, 0.35, so the market's basically calling it a coin flip three ways. The standout is Ecuador's ask depth collapsing versus earlier.
He's itching to get back on, and the crowd's half confused, half impatient. Feels like that minute's lasted an eternity. Now Ivory Coast are probing down that right. Diomande snapping to the byline. Cross-blocked, recycled, and you can hear the frustration bubbling.
Liquidity just evaporated on the bid side. Ivory Coast bid depth collapsing to basically nothing is a classic everyone pulled their orders moment. Prices look stable, but this is thin ice. One decent market order and you get a gap like a defensive line stepping up and Buyers just rushed back in. Ivory Coast rebuilds bid depth, and you've got a chunky top bid sitting up at 0.30, which is real support, not window dressing. Draw ticks up again, 2035, 0.36, so the market's leaning tight game.
Isaiah's been pacing that sideline like a caged lion, and the fans are still doing the math on this new rule. A minute feels like a lifetime when you're under the cosh. Diomande darts to the byline, cross gets smothered, and now it's scrappy. Someone's not happy. This new sit out a minute if plays stopped rule feels like a mini time penalty. Fans confused, player furious. From your angle, Amo, does football need more of these time is money rules to cut stoppages, or does it just add volatility like a jittery market?
You nailed it, Leo. These tweaks are like circuit breakers. They can calm the chaos, but they also create cliff edge moments where everyone reprices instantly. Great for flow if applied consistently, but if refs vary it, you get pure volatility and crowd psychology.
Valencia's got the red alert treatment, center back stepping up, tight as a seatbelt, no oxygen in behind, but Diomande's the spark here. You want him isolated 1v1 and daring that fullback. That's the kind of duel that flips a match during a hydration break.
We're back to that pulled bids vibe. Ivory Coast and the draw have basically no real support underneath, even though the top of book looks fine. Ecuador is the only one with meaningful bid depth, and it's edging up to 0.34, 0.35, so momentum's quiet.
Oh, that was a thunderclap off the woodwork. Philadelphia just held its breath in a sea of yellow. Alindez gifts it away. They pounce and bang. Crossbar saves them by a whisker. Caicedo lurking like he fancies the rebound.
That bid support just respawned. Ivory Coast and the draw both rebuilt depth fast, but look at the other side. Massive ask walls, especially on the draw and Ecuador, so upside is capped unless someone comes in swinging. Feels like a cagey midfield battle. Market's basically marking time. Spreads are tight and probs barely budge, but the book is still lopsided with heavy sell-side inventory overhead. That means rallies are likely to get sold into, like a team that can't get out of its own half because the press is relentless.
3 big warnings and still nothing on the scoreboard. Football can be cruel like that, can it? Hydration break now with 67,000 holding their breath in Philly, and both benches will be thinking, how are we not ahead? Scoreless, but it's simmering. They've knocked on this door 3 times and still can't kick it in. Those are the moments that come back to haunt you. Hydration break with 67,000 buzzing in Philly, and you just feel the next chance might be the one that finally breaks this deadlock.
Ivory Coast just firmed up, bid depth jumps to 66K, and the spread tightens down a tick, so someone's stepping in to defend that 0.29/0.30 line. But the draw still has that chunky 0.34 bid, so the market's basically
Another sponsor shout, but the stadium mood doesn't go anywhere. 67,000 are still humming, waiting for that first spark. As soon as the ball's rolling again, you can feel someone's going to try something outrageous to crack this open. That's the commercial sprint, but on the pitch, it's still a waiting game. Scoreless, tense, and ready to snap. The next attack has to be sharper because you don't get unlimited deliveries of chances in football. We're swimming in sponsor lines right now, but the real headline is the pressure building out there. One clean finish, and this place erupts. You can almost hear the players itching to restart and turn those near misses into something real.
Big shift on Ivory Coast. A real wall shows up at 0.29 with size and bid depth doubles. Someone's planting a flag and saying not below here. Ecuador ticks up a hair, but that draw ask stack is still a ceiling, so we're in a grinded out match unless that 0.2
IMO, this hydration break feels like a market reset. Ecuador's momentum spiking after that post hit. How do you read these cooling break swings like a quick liquidity injection before the next surge?
Totally, Leo. Those breaks act like a mini liquidity reopen. Spreads tighten, stale orders get pulled, and the next move can look exaggerated. If Ecuador's post hit jolts sentiment, you often see a quick bid pop, then sellers fade it like a count. That draw support just vanished from the top of book. Top bid drops to a tiny 0.04 level, so the stalemate floor looks a lot less trustworthy right now. Meanwhile, Ivory Coast still has that chunky 0.29 wall, so money's rotating to the safer Whoa! Yep, that yellow is like a volatility circuit breaker. Everyone plays a touch tighter, but one more reckless challenge and the whole book reprices. And you're right on goal difference. It's the tiebreak earnings surprise, turning A10 into a multi-point move. This is classic phantom support getting exposed. Ivory Coast still shows 0.29, 0.30, but the real top bid is down at 0.02, so the latter's basically missing rungs. Same story on the draw with a 0.03 top bid.
Big crunching tackle. Yellow card out, tempers rising. With Germany's 7-1 earlier,
Totally. When goal difference matters, teams stop playing for a clean 1-0 and start trading like they're down a goal in the 80th. Higher tempo, wider spreads, more breakaways. It's basically leverage. One extra goal is a big P&L swing. Draws getting the risk-off bid. Best bid ask up at 0.36, 0.37, and bid depth improving, while Ecuador and Ivory still look like thin ice underneath with those 0.01, 0.02 top bid levels. That's a market saying no hero ball, park the bus, and protect the point.
Germany's 7-1 earlier has turned this group into a goal difference market. Every chance now has real points value. How do you see teams changing risk appetite when GD becomes the tiebreaker? Ecuador just hit the reset button there, recycling it all the way to Galinda's calm heads, but you can sense the crowd begging for a quicker punch. Minda keeps drifting inside, looking for that one sharp pass to crack the orange wall.
Ivory Coast just found real footing again. Top bid snaps back to 0.28 instead of that sketchy 0.02, so the support looks legit for once. Ecuador is still a trapdoor with the top bid 8-0 and 0-1, meaning any panic sell can gap it like a bad backpack. Whoa, Ivory Coast liquidity just vanished. Bid depth collapses to under 6K, and the real top bid is back to 0.01, so that 0.27 and 0.28 quote is basically a cardboard cutout. Meanwhile, Ecuador's the only one showing a sturdier ladder with a 0.
Ecuador just smashed the bar again. 2 woodwork hits, momentum swinging hard after the hydration break. Feels like pressure building like a stock about to break resistance. Jump in with that analogy. It's a shooting gallery right now. Everything Ecuador hits is getting smothered. Bodies flying in like it's rush hour in the box, but you can feel it. One ricochet is going to fall kindly and this place will erupt. Another one swallowed up. Ivory Coast are throwing themselves in front of everything like human sandbags. Ecuador are turning the screw though. Keep peppering that area and the dam won't hold forever. Ecuador are hammering the box, 2 off the woodwork, and now a wall of blocks. Give me a quick market style take. Is this pressure like a stock about to break out or a bubble about to pop?
It's breakout pressure, but with nasty slippage risk. Every blocked shot is like buyers hitting the offer and not getting through. If the next chance goes in, you'll see a fast repricing. If not, it's a classic exhaustion fade. Now we've got real two-way action. Ecuador's top bid steps up to 0.06 and the ask wall drops to 0.81, which screams someone's leaning in for a move. But the draw is soaking up the flow with huge depth. This feels like extra time nerves where nobody wants...
Oh, that's the kind of chance that haunts you. Yaboa does everything right, arrives like a thief in the night, and just gets under it. Ecuador are winning it high and turning it into chaos instantly. If they keep robbing them upfield, the breakthrough's coming.
Big tell here, Cote d'Ivoire's book just thinned out and the top bid collapsed to 0.82. Confidence got yanked fast. Ecuador's got a chunky bid sitting at 0.35, so the tape's basically saying they're in control, while the draw stays the crowded.
He's timed it beautifully, opens his body, and then, gets that tiny bit too much air under the strike. It's cruel. That ref cam angle shows the danger. One clean first-time hit and the net bulges, and it all comes from Ecuador hunting like wolves up high.
That Ecuador 0.35 bid support just vanished. Now the top bid's down at 0.04, so someone pulled the liquidity like a defender stepping out of the line. Meanwhile, Cote d'Ivoire's ask wall slid to 0.80, which hints at a little less fear of the upset, but it's still heavy.
And Capia is snapping at heels like a terrier, and Ivory Coast can't breathe. Every touch feels like it's on a ticking clock. And that challenge there, oof! I thought the whistle was coming, Imo. That's the kind of no call that makes a stadium boil. That no call on the edge of the box is like a market flash crash. Crowd thinks it's a sure whistle. Ref says, hold your positions. Ecuador's press is squeezing Ivory Coast like a short seller's dream. Any thoughts on momentum swings when the expected call doesn't land?
Yep, when the expected whistle doesn't come, you get a quick sentiment air pocket. Everyone priced in the free kick, and suddenly it's repriced in real time. If Ecuador stay composed, that anger turns into extra tempo. If not, it's a classic tilt and the counterpunch opens. Exactly. When the ref waves it on, it's like a catalyst that gets yanked at the last second and you see instant whiplash. The team that resets fastest usually wins the next 5 minutes, like buyers stepping back in after a failed breakdown. We just saw a full-on liquidity mirage. Côte d'Ivoire's top bid flashed down to a penny, then snaps back with real size sitting up at 0.20. Classic head fake that shakes out weak hands. Ecuador's still priced as co-favorite, but that bid stack is flimsy.
Diomande trying to wriggle out on that right side, but you can feel the pressure building. One loose touch and Ecuador will pounce again. Dan untuk oleh tuan yang terhormat, saya tangkap itu boss. Kita lanjut, ini lagi panas di lapangan. Diomande slides it into the skipper, and now Singo gets his head up. Ivory Coast trying to slow the chaos and build something with a bit of authority. But Ecuador are hovering like sharks, ready to bite the moment that pass gets lazy.
Côte d'Ivoire's book just firmed up, top bid now basically at the market around 0.26, so buyers are finally showing up with conviction instead of hiding. But look at those massive ask walls near 0.98, 0.99 across all outcomes.
Drops it back under pressure, and then panics it, hoofed into the crowd like he's trying to clear his own thoughts. Ecuador will love that. Every rush touch is another little victory, another squeeze on the tempo. Imo, Ecuador are squeezing Ivory Coast into rushed long balls. Feels like a market sell-off forcing bad decisions. Give us a quick pressure versus patience analogy here.
Absolutely. This is like a high volatility tape where the press forces you to hit the panic sell button and dump quality possessions into low percentage punts. The side that slows the game for 2 passes is basically raising cash and regaining control of the next phase. Côte d'Ivoire just ticked down a notch. Bid, ask slid to 0.26, 0.27, and bid depth thinned, so the home support is getting a little wobbly. Meanwhile, the draw stays the default trade at 0.36, 0.37, like the market's saying. Nobody's landed the knock.
Oof, that back pass to Singo had disaster written all over it, but Ecuador sniff it out with a huge little intervention. One slip and Diomande is gone down the flank. Now Plata drifts inside, but he's crowded out, no room to breathe.
And just like that, the bids reappear. Côte d'Ivoire back to a normal 27.28 with depth rebuilt, so that earlier air pocket looks more like a spoofy pullback than real capitulation. Still, Ecuador's ask side is stacked heavy, so upside moves are going to feel like running.
Plata wants the quick return again, but it's swallowed up. Ivory Coast are reading his intentions like an open book. Ecuador keep knocking, but the final link just isn't clicking right now. Down the right at the halfway line, he's trying to light the fuse, but the marker just about sticks with him and the danger fizzles. They recycle it into the middle, looking for that one pass to crack it open. He's off down the right from halfway, trying to burn his man, but the defender recovers and doesn't let him escape. They tuck it back inside, probing the middle like they're searching for a loose brick in the wall. Torres arriving at the far post. Now that was the moment, the kind you don't get twice in a tight game, but it ricochets and skitters away, and suddenly it's pinball on that right side. Bodies flying, nobody quite able to land the clean touch.
Now that's a real tell. Côte d'Ivoire's top bid has stepped up to 0.27, and the big sell wall isn't way up at 0.99 anymore. It's down at 0.75, so supply's getting closer and more actionable. Feels like the market's bracing for a swing moment. That's a serious base being built. Côte d'Ivoire has a monster stack at 0.27 now, so the floor looks defended like a back four sitting deep. But the draw just firmed to 0.37, 0.38, so the crowd's still pricing a stalemate unless someone creates a real change. Totally. When a fullback bombs on with no cover, that's like levering up into a thin book. One turnover and you gap lower fast. If Ivory Coast keep winning that 1v1, Ecuador's win odds can bleed while the draw stays sticky until the finish. Cote d'Ivoire's bid wall, ATO27, is still rock solid and asks are thinning, so downside looks cushioned and any positive catalyst can pop it quickly. Ecuador's probability is leaking a touch, but the draw remains the default scoreline trade. Sticky until a real...
Pacho steps in and Rodriguez gets nudged off it. White's made it a scrap out there. Then Vélez just launches it long again, but the defense rises and wins the first duel, and the second ball is suddenly there begging for someone to pounce.
Cote d'Ivoire keeps getting heavier on the bid, total depth up again, so buyers are basically parking the bus 80 at 27 and daring sellers to break it. Meanwhile, draw and Ecuador are still swimming in overhead supply, so rallies look like they'll be...
Ivory Coast can't dawdle there. Every extra touch is an invitation for Ecuador to swarm and nick it high up the pitch. And there it is, Duguay with the two-handed shove. That's a cheap foul on the left and a little pressure valve for Ecuador to crank up again. Ecuador lining it up again. This is where defenders start grabbing shirts and goalkeepers start barking orders. If the ball hangs up, it's a lottery in there, and Ivory Coast have to win that first header or it's trouble. Another dead ball chance. Ecuador will fancy this. They've got bodies ready to crash the 6-yard line. Ivory Coast can't switch off for a second here. One mistimed step, and it's a free run at goal. Yeah, those are the gifts for a referee. Two hands in the back, and you're basically signing the whistle yourself. Pacho's had a busy spell there, and now we're wrapping it up. And James Corden after this, talk about a change of pace from flying elbows and second ball. Oh, that's rash. Kessie arrives late and heavy, and on a second booking, you've... Absolutely, Amo. One whistle and the whole market flips. You can almost see the price action on the pitch. Cote d'Ivoire have to go into capital preservation mode now, compact and ugly, because Ecuador's momentum buyers are already piling in. We've got a second yellow. Kessie sent off for a late, over-aggressive challenge as he drove through midfield. 10 men now. Talk about how a red card is like a sudden earnings miss. Everything reprices instantly.
That red is a pure sentiment shock, like an earnings miss plus guidance cut in one whistle. Expect Cote d'Ivoire to gap down fast, draw to firm, and Ecuador to get the momentum bid as traders chase the man advantage.
Oh no, he's played it forward and then just crumples. That's a horrible sight. You can feel the stadium hold its breath. The card's out as well, so tempers are bubbling. This match is turning into a pressure cooker. He's nowhere near the ball, and suddenly he's on the turf. Everyone's looking at the referee, and you can sense the panic in the... Oof, UH is flirting with disaster there. Studs on the foot, and suddenly Ecuador have a set piece in a wicked pocket to bend one in. Refs reaching for the notebook again, and 3 yellows this early. That's a tinderbox, Lori.
Spot on. Red card is an instant repricing event. Liquidity vanishes, spreads widen, and everyone scrambles to hedge. You can see it in the book. Cote d'Ivoire bid depth just collapsed and the best bid slipped, like a stock gapping down on bad guidance. Spot on. Red card is an instant repricing event. Liquidity vanishes, spreads widen, and everyone marks down the short-handed side like a surprise earnings miss. You can see it when the bid wall gets yanked and the market starts trading on survival mode.
Exactly, Amo. Once you're down a man, it's like the market switches from growth to pure risk-off in a heartbeat. Every tackle becomes a volatile candle, and those early yellows are widening the spread even more. One more rash move and it crashes. Paco gets it back into their half, and you can feel the nerves. 40 minutes gone and still no breakthrough. Ecuador have rattled the woodwork twice, and that crossbar is starting to feel like an extra defender out there. Valencia's had that one big sniff, and since then he's been hunting scraps, trying to squeeze it through the eye of a needle. And that contact there, nah, that's not just shoulder to shoulder, that's a nudge with intent, and the ref's watching closely.
We're seeing a stalemate in pricing, draw still the market's favorite at 39%, but the real tell is liquidity. Cote d'Ivoire's bid depth stays thin, so confidence is fragile. Ecuador's support cooled off too, which screams wait and see rather than a...
Right back's a minefield right now. Dive in and you're toast. Stay smart and hold your line. Pata stands over it at 41 with nothing on the board, and you can feel the stadium holding its breath for that whip into the danger zone.
Now we've got buyers jogging back onto the pitch. Cote d'Ivoire bid depth rebounds hard, and the top bid steps up to 0.25, so that downside air pocket is less scary. Ecuador ticks down a notch to 0.34,
You're dead right. Right back is where matches get won or lost, and you can't go flying in like a cowboy. Pot is poised over it in the 41st 0-0, and this is the kind of moment where one swing of the boot can change the whole temperature.
Liquidity just ballooned on the sell side for draw in Ecuador. Those ask stacks are like a packed defense line, hard to break through without a real catalyst. Côte d'Ivoire's bid depth is healthier, but the top bid sitting down at 0.02 tells you
Fana launches it long, and suddenly it's chaos. Pacho up in the air, and it comes straight back like a boomerang. Heezier tries to thread the middle. It's snuffed out. Valencia's hunting for a touch, and then the ball just vanishes in the lights. Nobody's picked it up. That deflection drops kindly, and for a split second you think Plata's in, then it just won't sit up for him. Iboa and Caicedo slam the door and shove it back upfield. No freebies in this one.
Totally, Leo. That's the ball in the sun moment where price discovery disappears and everyone swings at air. In that kind of volatility, the edge is staying small and patient until the book rebuilds. Let the first panic wave pass, then play the rebound. Not a lot of price movement, but the tone is heavy overhead. Draw and Ecuador still have massive ask depth, so rallies are getting sold into quickly. Côte d'Ivoire looks stable, 0.26, 0.27, yet that weirdly low
What a day already. Score lines flying around, and here we are in a tight one heading into stoppage time. With that hydration break and Caicedo's knock, the board's going up for sure, and these next minutes can swing the whole mood of the match.
Big shift. Côte d'Ivoire's offer stack just exploded, $500,000 on the ask, so that side's getting faded hard even though price hasn't cracked yet. Meanwhile, draw is creeping up 2.40, 0.41 like a slow counterattack, and Ecuador's book
Diomande wants it, gets it on the right, and just lays it back, keeping the tempo ticking like a metronome. 西咪？是啊，你第九席问真提法，5毛仙单登机会1到9报。
Côte d'Ivoire just slipped a tick to 0.25, 0.26, and the win prob fades to 25%. That's the market conceding territory with a massive sell wall still looming. Draw holds 41% and stays bid, so traders are basically playing for a stalemate. Ecuador's
Good read from Ivory Coast to nick that pass, but you can feel Ecuador's pockets between the lines are starting to itch. Someone's finding little cracks. Diomande's got to stop checking short every time and just spin one in behind, make that backline turn and panic. Ivory Coast have read that lane nicely, but Ecuador are still sneaking into that little no man's land between midfield and defense. Diomande's got to gamble, make that run, demand the ball over the top, because checking back every time is letting Ecuador breathe. Yeah, it's getting a touch scripted now. Same pattern, same safe options, and Ecuador are starting to read it like tomorrow's headlines. Ivory Coast need one moment of chaos, a sudden run, or a first-time ball just to jolt the game awake.
liquidity just got yanked. Bid depth on Côte d'Ivoire and the draw collapsed. So this market's suddenly thin ice, and any decent order can shove prices around. Odds haven't moved much yet, but with that shallow support, it's a classic late-game scramble.
There it is, finally a ball in behind, and you can see the whole stadium lean forward. But you're right, if everything stays to feet, Ecuador just set their traps and squeeze. Ivory Coast need runners flying past shoulders, not standing in front of them.
Buy-side liquidity just refilled, especially on the draw, but the sell side is still towering. This is a market that wants to rally and immediately gets met at the top of the box. Côte d'Ivoire's ask depth ballooning again keeps that 0.25 bid feeling like
Galindo slams the door on that cross, and you can hear Pepe howling. He wanted it recycled, not forced. If he just holds that line a heartbeat longer, the angle opens up and suddenly it's a tap-in conversation instead of a block delivery.
Draw just ticked up to 0.41, 0.42, while win prob stays 41%. That's buyers pressing higher even with a big wall of supply still parked above. Côte d'Ivoire remains pinned at 0.25, 0.26 with heavy asks, so it's still playing defense, not dictating tempo.
That's the pass we've been begging for. Suddenly it's panic stations at the back with stoppage time ticking like a bomb. And Ordóñez, oh, that little bit of magic from Plata, silky feet drifting everywhere. He's the one trying to steal it at the death.
Now that's a momentum swing. Ecuador just got marked down to 0.31, 0.32, and the bid depth is basically gone, so any sell pressure can slice through like a counterattack. Côte d'Ivoire pops back to 0.26, 0.27 with healthier bids.
There's that dagger ball again, and with 4 added minutes, it feels like the clock's sprinting. Those crossbar rattlers are haunting them now, and Plata, what a glide, popping up left and right like a magician looking for one last trick. Kouame's waving his arms like he's hailing a taxi out there. Acres of space, and they still go short. Frustrating. The kid gets doubled up and shrugs it off, but you feel a big switch was on if they just trusted it. Diawante turns on the Jets down the byline, chops it back, and it takes a nick. Corner kick, that's the pressure you want. Ibrahim swings it in, hanging in the mixer, and they peel off to the edge, looking for that second ball punch.
We've got a real liquidity flip. Bids just came roaring back in draw in Ecuador, but the ask side ballooned even more. Classic buyers show up, sellers lean harder. Côte d'Ivoire slips back to 0.25, 0.26 with a massive...
They recycle it from miles out, switch it right, and Hamy Doué whips one in with real venom. It flashes through and just won't dip. Bar or post territory, that was a warning shot you can hear from the stands.
Ecuador's the story. There's a big seller sitting right on the 0.32 ask, so every uptick is getting smothered, like trying to play out from the back against a high press. Draw liquidity on the bid side is still thin, so if sentiment turns, it can gap fast.
Diawante eats up that byline, little burst of pace, and forces the deflection. Corner again, that's proper wing play. Ibrahim drops it into the danger zone, bodies collide, and it squirts out to the edge, begging for a clean hit. Diawante's got that sprinter's burst, 2 men in front of him, and he still wins the race, chops it back, and earns the corner. Lovely stuff. Ibrahim hangs it into the middle. It's chaos for a heartbeat, and then it spills out wide. Ecuador just about survived. He's only halfway through the move, and he fancies himself, goes for the instinctive bicycle, and I love the audacity. Why not? It loops back awkwardly, the keeper's scrambling, and then, oh, he can't quite steer it. The pass toward Incapié, and Diamande just... He's improvising on the fly, throws the bicycle at it like he's in the playground, and you've got to respect the nerve. It spins back toward goal, keeper reacts, but the finish just won't behave, and the little slip toward Incapié and Diamande goes begging.
Now you're seeing a little risk-off wobble. Ecuador ticks down to 0.30 yards, 0.31, and the draw bid depth cools, so the late money's not chasing. Côte d'Ivoire's book looks weirdly thin at the top bid levels, which screams air pocket if someone hits it. Still, that 0.44 draw offer... That's a notable shift. Ecuador bid depth just exploded with a big stack 8-0-30, so someone's building a real defensive wall and saying we're not going lower. Draw is still the consensus play, but the sell side is getting heavier, so upside feels like stoppage time drama. Côte d'Ivoire just got a near-term ceiling. That chunky 0.27 ask is basically a parked bus, so rallies are going to stall fast. Draw stays pinned 8.43, 0.44 with heavy offers, and Ecuador's book is two-sided.
Halftime 0-0, but Ivory Coast tempo just spiked late. More vertical runs, more chaos. Give us your market close take. Who's trending up, who's under pressure, and what's the second half catalyst?
Spot on, Leo. Late tempo is like a bid stepping up into the close. Ivory Coast is trending up while the draw is under pressure because it's the most crowded trade. Second half catalyst is the first clean chance or set piece. One goal, and that whole book flipped.
Halftime no neural, but Ivory Coast tempo just spiked. Feels like a market waking up after a flat open. Any quick take on momentum shifts and who looks ready to break resistance in the second half?
Yeah, that late surge is the tape finally printing higher highs. Ivory Coast looks closest to breaking resistance because they're forcing transitions and second balls. Ecuador feels more like they're defending a level. If they nick one on the break, it's a sudden gap move.
Halftime whistle, and it's still goalless, but don't let that fool you. Ivory Coast have finally found a bit of zip down the flanks, runners flying past Ecuador's markers and asking real questions. Ecuador have stayed disciplined, yet one vertical burst. Oh, that woodwork is still ringing in their ears. 2 knocks on the door, and now you can feel the stadium holding its breath for that third swing. And Amo, that grit versus results line sounds like the market too. Sometimes effort isn't the catalyst you need. Twice off the bar, Ecuador and Chile are playing pinball with the goal, and you just know the next clean strike could blow the roof off. And Amo, that's like a stock tapping resistance again and again. Sooner or later, it either breaks through or bites you.
That Cote d'Ivoire ask depth just ballooned, over 600K, so upside is getting crowded out like a team stuck in its own half. Draw in Ecuador looks steadier by comparison, with Ecuador's 0.30 bid stack still the strongest support on the pitch. Cote d'Ivoire is getting absolutely smothered by supply. Ask depth up to 720K while bids barely budge. That's a classic rally gets sold setup. Meanwhile, the draw's bid depth is firming, and Ecuador still has that chunky 0.30 base like a team protecting a one.
Whoa, that's the broadcast slamming the brakes. Stop running like a manager barking from the touchline when the game's turning chaotic. No improv, no circus, just get your shape back and calm the ball down before it bites you. 5 minutes left and you can feel the tension creeping into every touch. This is where legs get heavy and minds get louder. Fourth official's board is basically a warning label. One mistake now and it's headline stuff.
Now, Ecuador's bid depth just got yanked down to about 123K, and that out 30 top bid shrinks hard, so the defense isn't as sturdy as it looked. The draw's sell wall thinned a bit at 0.44, but Cote d'Ivoire still has a mountain of supply overhead and the win.
Imo, jump in. Sounds like we need a quick educate the viewers moment. Give us the simple version like explaining a market move in stoppage time. What should people focus on first?
You got it, Leo. First look at where the biggest bids and asks are stacked, because that's the real defensive line and goal mouth traffic. Then watch which side is getting pulled or added fast. That's momentum, and in stoppage time, it flips the odds in a heart.
Fair play, Amo. None of us knows everything. That's why we watch, we learn, and we let the game teach us in real time. Tell me what you want to get up to speed on, teams, tactics, or the big moments, and we'll break it down quick.
Cote d'Ivoire's sell side pressure finally eased a bit. Ask depth drops from the 700s to about 629K, but it's still a heavy lid, so rallies can get headed away. Ecuador's bid depth remains thin, and the draw keeps the cleanest lane with that warrior.
Imo, you're talking drama, baseball night on Fox, Soto bombs, Harper fireworks. Give us a quick market-style take. Which matchup feels like the blue chip and which is the high volatility play? Imo, you're plugging baseball night like it's an earnings call. Give me your gut pick logic. Why Spain feels like the blue chip here, and what's the risk factor like a volatile stock?
I'm with you. Spain's the blue chip because the system travels, possession control, depth, and a high ratings floor game to game. The volatility is finishing and knockout randomness, one red card or a keeper standing on his head, and that premium multiple compresses. Now the draw's getting crowded on the sell side. Ask depth jumps to about 662K, so that 0.44 level is a real brick wall, like parking the bus. Ecuador's also seeing heavier offers, which tells you upside is getting capped unless a catalyst clears those.
Imo, you're cross-promoting baseball like it's a blue chip. Give me your market pick for USA versus Spain at 7 Eastern, and which MLB matchup you'd buy if it were a stock.
Fair. Spain's my market pick. Deeper bench, cleaner structure, and the US still trades like a momentum name that can fade if the first 15 minutes go quiet. On the MLB side, I'd buy the star-studded matchup. More liquidity, more... Yeah, the gut's a great momentum signal, but data's your risk manager, especially when Spain's baseline quality is the higher earnings yield. If the US starts fast, trade the swing. If not, Spain's the steady compounder. Big tell here. Draw ask depth just dropped hard to about 569K, so that sell wall is thinning and the market's a bit more open to a pop through of Q4. Cote d'Ivoire still has a mountain of supply overhead, so the cleaner upside lane, if any, looks like draw.
All right, roll it back. World Cup 2026 on Fox, presented by Lay's, and you can almost hear the crunch before the whistle. That tagline's pure hype fuel. One more look, one more heartbeat, because this tournament's going to be absolute chaos in the best way.
Now, Ecuador's offer stack is thinning fast. Ask depth down to about 559K, and the top ask even nudges up to 0.33, which screams sellers stepping back. Draw demand is building on the bid side, so it's starting to look like a tight, tactical one. That Cote d'Ivoire sell wall just evaporated back down near 621k. Someone pulled the offers. So downside pressure eases and you can get a quick squeeze if bids step up. But Ecuador's ask depth reloaded to 663k, so the easy breakout story just got better.
Second half coming, and it's still Zulu, but don't let that fool you. This one's been rattling like a shopping cart on cobblestones with those two crossbars. Ivory Coast will feel they've left goals out there, and Ecuador in that sea of yellow know one punch could swing it all.
We're back to a choppy range-bound tape. Cote d'Ivoire supply creeps up again. Draw sellers are stacking 8 range 44, and Ecuador's ask depth drops back near 503k. Feels like both teams slowing it down in midfield. Cote d'Ivoire bids are thinning while the sell side stays heavy, so that 0.25 support looks a bit more like a tired backline. Ecuador's bid depth is improving, but with offers still stacked up, any rally probably needs a catalyst rather than just vibes. Order book just went haywire. Top bids collapsed to 0.02, 0.04, and top asks jumped to 0.97, 0.99 across outcomes. Looks like liquidity pulled or market glitch. Can you riff on this like a match stoppage VAR moment and what it means?
Oh, that's a full-on VAR blackout moment. Everyone freezes, the noise turns into nervous laughter, and suddenly nobody trusts what they're seeing on the board. When liquidity vanishes like that, the crowd psychology flips to panic protect mode. Spreads widen. And we're back under that Philly sunset. Gold everywhere like Ecuador have painted the whole bowl. Those 3 yellows for Ivory Coast are handcuffs in a knife fight, so they've got to defend smart and spring Diamande early before caution turns into catastrophe. Oh, that was the moment. One clean touch and it's curtains, but Franco throws himself in like a human sandbag and keeps it out. Ivory Coast are knocking hard now. You can feel the pressure rising with every pass into that channel.
Order book looks broken, illiquid. Top bid levels showing 0.01, 0.02, while best bid ask still 0.24, 0.44, plus huge 0.99 asks. Can you riff on this like a match with VAR chaos? Crowds.
Yeah, that's VAR chaos with the fourth official's board flickering. Everyone takes 2 steps back and the game loses its rhythm. When the book looks like that, spreads stretch like a tired backline and momentum stalls because nobody wants to be the one caught out. Valencia sniffing around the edge like a shark in shallow water. One little gap and he'll bite. That ball ricochets back into the danger zone and suddenly Ivory Coast are scrambling, hearts and mouths, praying it skims wide. Valencia's winding up again. Every defender knows what's coming, and still it feels inevitable. That second ball drops like a gift, and for a split second, the whole stadium holds its breath as it flashes just past the post.
This book looks like a liquidity timeout. Real quotes are still around, 0.4, 0.25, and 0.31, 0.32, but the top depth is showing goofy 0.02 bids and 0.99 asks like placeholders. Liquidity's still thin and a bit ghosty with those 0.99 walls, but the real tell is Ecuador bid depth collapsing to about 12k. One decent sell and it slips. Cote d'Ivoire looks slightly firmer back at 0.25, 0.26, yet it's still a low.
Ecuador are cranking the dial, wide to in, quick little triangles, and the crowd's humming like a power grid. But Ivory Coast have to tread on eggshells with those yellows, and that makes every tackle feel like it's on a tightrope as Singo drives them forward. Ecuador are playing like they've smelled blood, Valencia drifting, the tempo snapping up, and the stands are right in it with them. But Ivory Coast on those yellows are defending like they're carrying glass, and that crossfield surge through Singo suddenly looks dangerous. Big ball up to Torre, and he's manhandled there. Still keeps his balance like a street fighter. Franco nicks it back, but then it's sloppy in midfield. Conan tries to thread it, and it's pinched. Sudden turnover, danger brewing.
We're back to that fake wall look. 0.99 offers everywhere and tiny real money underneath, so price can gap on a sneeze. Ecuador ticked up to 0.32, 0.33, but it's not conviction, it's just nobody pressing. This is a match being decided by one counter.
Ivory Coast flirting with disaster. Another tug that could have been a yellow. Feels like a portfolio overloaded with risky positions. One more bad challenge and it's a red card crash. What's your take on managing that kind of risk mid-game?
Totally agree, Leo. When the ref's reaching for the pocket, you don't double down, you de-risk. In market terms, you tighten stops, trim the weakest exposure, and keep dry powder for the inevitable volatility spike.
Ecuador are reading it brilliantly, holding shape, stealing the lanes, then exploding down that left like a sprinter out the blocks. But that last pass is the party pooper, and Franco's foul slows the rhythm as Agbadou resets it and Singo starts to wind. Same pattern again, Ecuador staying brave between the lines, nicking space, and then flying wide left with real intent. But the killer pass just isn't there, and Franco's foul breaks the flow as Agbadou rolls it on and Singo looks to drive the next wave.
Big shift, Ecuador's bid depth just ballooned to nearly 90K, while price holds 0.31, 0.32, someone's building a real floor. Meanwhile, Cote d'Ivoire asks exploded over 500K, so upside there looks capped. Feels like Ecuador draw just got marked up a notch to 0.44 or 0.45, and that's the market leaning into stalemate positioning. Classic late game time wasting trade. Ecuador still has a chunky bid stack under it, but the ask side is heavy again, so upside needs a real catalyst, not just vibe.
The Suns ducked out in Philly and suddenly the game's got oxygen again. Both sides look ready to hit fast forward the moment they cross halfway. That back pass was a ticking bomb. Fofana handles it, but Ivory Coast keep making life hard for themselves. And they've just handed. Gofana's got support and suddenly the attack has options. Richard peels wide and Diawante is stretching them high and wide. That's the trigger. They win it and bang, they're sprinting into space and the rookie's right in the headlights with bodies flying out to meet him.
You can see the air coming out of Ecuador. Bid depth got cut hard while the price still sits at 0.30, 0.31, so that floor was more bluff than brick. Draw's got a real bid parked at 0.43 now, like a team happy to kill the clock and take the point.
Gofana's got runners with him now, Richard hugging the touchline, and Diawante suddenly going high and wide like a winger, stretching the whole shape. The moment they nick it back, they're off like a breakaway train, and that rookie's got a big decision with a defender stepping out. He drags two markers with him, and suddenly Diamant's got daylight. Nice little drift, better angle. Oh, but he carves it like a Sunday golfer, and the chance evaporates. That was sharp, though. Seiko Rafana in behind, Diomande arriving central.
This book is screaming range-bound. All three outcomes are pinned with massive ask depth overhead, so rallies are getting headed away like corners. Draw remains the cleanest momentum trade at Zoe 0.45 with that.
Gofana lifts his head and he's got company. Richard stays wide and Diawante is suddenly parked high like a winger, pulling the defense apart. They win it and explode forward, and that rookie's about to get a real welcome with a defender stepping out to shut the door.
Now the draw bid depth is the standout, up near 95K, so the market's crowding into the safe point like a team protecting A00. Ecuador's bids are rebuilding too, but Cote d'Ivoire is buried under a monster sell side, so any pop there looks like it gets sold fat. Ecuador bid depth just collapsed to 4K while ask is 484K. Market feels like it pulled the goalie on Ecuador and liquidity vanished. Can you frame this as a momentum crowd psych swing like a team losing belief late?
Absolutely, Imo. When the bid side disappears like that, it's like Ecuador's backline stepping up and suddenly nobody tracks the runner. Panic spreads and belief drains fast. The crowd senses it, momentum flips, and one shove can turn into a full-on collapse. Rondones tries to stroll it up, but Ecuador's midfield door is slammed shut. No room, no oxygen, just bodies in the lane. And you can feel the gamesmanship now. Capier fishing for that whistle, trying to plant a seed in the ref's head. Rondones brings it up, but that central block is a brick wall. Ecuador can't breathe through the middle, so they're forced to shove it wide and hope for scraps. And Capier's selling the contact again, trying to buy a whistle like it's a set-piece coupon. Ivory Coast's defense has been... Rondones keeps probing, but that central corridor is sealed. Ecuador are being herded wide like cattle, and it's all elbows and angles out there. Capier's still lobbying for a cheap whistle, trying to tilt the ref's mood. And credit where it's due, Ivory Coast...
Cote d'Ivoire just firmed to 0.25, 0.26, while Ecuador slipped to 0.29, 0.30. And the big tell is Ecuador's bid depth is basically gone. Thin ice if sellers show up. Draws still priced like the favorite, but that bid depth halved, so the parking the bus trade...
Oh, that movement is pure striker's craft. Stays wide, then darts across at the last heartbeat and steals a yard like a pickpocket in a crowd. The service arrives and it's agony. Ivory Coast have carved them open with pace, and you can see the disbelief written all over.
Big reversal in the plumbing. Draw bid depth is back over 100K and Ecuador bids rebuilt to 54K, so the buyers just stepped back onto the pitch with fresh legs. Price hasn't moved much, but that's classic accumulation. Still, the giant ask walls mean any rally needs a real...
Ivory Coast just switched the attacking plan midstream, players rotating into midfield, winger holding width. Give me a quick market style take. Is this a smart reallocation of resources or panic pivot?
Draw just nudged up to 0.460.47, and that's the market leaning even harder into no winner, like both teams settling for a point. Bid depth on the draw is rising too, so buyers are defending that level, but those massive ask stacks still cap the upside.
Oof, that was nearly a gift-wrapped turnover. He's nicked it, but then gets shrugged off like a coat in a hurry. Ecuador survived the wobble, but Ivory Coast are sniffing blood every time that ball gets loose. Again, it's nearly pinched, and then he's just muscled out of it. Ecuador using the body like a shield at the last second. Ivory Coast can't afford to get cute there, win it clean, and make it count. That's the pattern. Bounce it off, then slice runners through the middle, and for a second, Ecuador's shape actually creaks, but the touch is heavy and the door slams shut again because Ecuador love a duel and they'll bite your ankles all day. Oh, that bad touch is a little invitation and they snap it up. Suddenly the whole tempo flips, but they choose the safer reset. Back it goes deeper and Ecuador get a heartbeat to reorganize.
Liquidity's back, but it's weirdly thin at the top, fat in the basement. Both Ivory Coast and Ecuador show top bids down at 0.802, so real support near the market is shaky. Meanwhile, the draw stays pinned AT 0.46, 0.
Yamoa teases it.
Yep, that's...
Early doors for the benches. Nilsson and Gulo get the nod, and Minda's hooked before the hour. That's a loud message from the coach, and Ivory Coast answers straight back. Hawaii off, Toure on, fresh legs and fresh intent. This game's about to change gear. Aimo, Ecuador's making their first sub. Angulo on for Mendoza. Feels like a tactical rebalance after that handball shout and a big defensive stand. Double switch before the... here we go. Amad Diallo steps in with that Manchester United sparkle, and suddenly the defenders are checking their mirrors. And Joao Boni on too. Inter Milan muscle in the mix. Two subs that scream, we want this. Let's see who blinks first.
That draw spread just widened to 460.48. Buyers are still there, but sellers are getting a bit greedier, which screams late game uncertainty. Ecuador's bid stack looks healthier near 280.29, but the massive overhead asks say rallies are... Spread on the draw snaps back to 0.460.47, so that little wobble got bought. Market's still leaning no winner unless we get a real catalyst. The sneaky tell is Ecuador's top ask dropping to 0.81. Someone's willing to sell closer, which can...
Yeah, that's a gamble, isn't it? Keeping a booked man out there is like juggling fireworks in a phone booth, but with Yaya, Toure, Boni, and Diallo on, they're basically saying that we'll outscore the risk, and that's box office stuff.
Now we're seeing a real tilt toward the draw, bid up to 0.47 and probability nudging 48%, while both teams' win prices soften and liquidity thins out. That's the market basically playing for penalties. Fewer buyers willing to back a late. Ecuador just ticked down to 270.28 while the draw holds firm 847.0.48. Money's rotating into the stalemate and fading Ecuador's late push. But notice draw bid depth got cut hard. If a goal chance pops up, this thing can gap like a...
You're spot on about Fofana and Kessie. Those two are the Pistons, and when they rev, Ivory Coast surge forward in waves. Diomande nearly wriggles through the gap, then lets fly. But it sails, and that's a let-off with the crowd holding its breath. Discipline's the word because Fofana and Kessié are dragging this team over the line with sheer engine room grit. That move had a little sting. Fofana slips it in, they recycle. Diomande dances past two and then blasts it into the sky. What a chance to make it count. You can feel it. Fofana and Kessié are the heartbeat, and if they stay calm, they can strangle this game with discipline. But Diomande bursting through and then ballooning the shot, that's the kind of miss that invites trouble back in.
Big shift. Cote d'Ivoire just got marked up to 0.26, 0.27, while draw bid depth collapses and Ecuador liquidity basically vanishes. This is a momentum swing with a thin book. Feels like the crowd just started leaning into a late winner narrative, and in a market this shallow...
Oh, he's cooked them there. Two defenders wrong-footed. That little burst of pace is pure street football, but the finish lets him down, swiping under it when all he needed was to hit the target and make the keeper work. Galindez stays ice cold and launches it long again. That's the agony of a dribbler. He sent two men for a hot dog with that change of pace, then the final touch betrays him. You've got to at least test Galindez because now the keeper's calm as you like, pinging that long ball and resetting the pressure. Diamante threads it and then tries to force the square ball, snuffed out, and Fofana gets muscled off before they just hoof it clear. Valencia's stranded up there like a lone lighthouse, and you can feel the shape screaming for support right now.
That little Cote d'Ivoire pop just got faded, back to 0.25, 0.26, while the draw reasserts itself with chunky bid depth again, classic false break in a choppy tape. Ecuador slipping to bite 26, 0.27 tells you the market's pricing less conviction in a...
Oh, Piedemonte, that touches velvet, kills it dead like he's got glue on his boots. Then he whips it across and suddenly it's chaos in the box. Gorgeous if you're neutral, absolute heartburn if you've got a dog in this fight. You can see Franco barking for cover, drops off, buys time, and finally the cavalry arrives down that flank. And listen to those orange shirts in Philly turning it into a mini home end, short corner coming, Fofana over it. This could be a set-piece sting. Oh, that's cheeky. Nicks it on the edge, spins right back onto his own pass, and suddenly the lane opens up. One more clean touch, and it's panic stations for the back line. This is where a game tilts in a heartbeat.
Draw just hit the psychological 50% line, 8-0.
Second World Cup nerves and dreams all bundled up on the touchline. Posadillo and Jackson itching to jump in and change the temperature. But we've got a delay here, and you just hope it doesn't kill Ecuador's momentum as they're trying to spark something. Galindo does brilliantly there. Routine on paper, but with traffic in front, that's a goalkeeper earning his dinner, seeing it late and still grabbing it clean. Ivory Coast are on top now, Ecuador chasing shadows, and suddenly it's ripped down the near side again. Here we go.
Nothing's blinking here. Draw stays pinned. Exactly, Leo. This is a delayed fill. You hit the button, but the execution comes late and the price has already moved on you. That pause bleeds momentum, and when the subs finally enter, it's like reopening after a halt. First few touches can spike volatility. Yeah, Leo, that's a classic change the shape moment. Market reads it slightly bullish Ecuador because it's fresh legs and intent, not surrender. But with that big sell wall overhead, it's more...
Finally, the green light. Those two subs are on the edge of the pitch like sprinters waiting for the gun. Cespedes was fuming a moment ago, but now the ref waves them in and Ecuador have a chance to flip the script in a heartbeat. Imo, we've got a coach fuming on the touchline. Subs blocked for some reason. Real procedural controversy. Give us your take. Is this like a market halt killing momentum? And what's the rulebook angle here? Cespedes is furious. Yaboa's number goes up, and that's the signal. Fresh legs incoming, and Franco's part of the shuffle too. Ecuador are burning through their windows now, so these changes have to hit like a jolt of electricity, not just a gentle breeze. Casado coming on makes total sense. Viomani's been tearing down that left side like he owns the postcode, so you plug the leak fast. Straight swap, tighten the shape, and now Ivory Coast with the free kick. This is where pressure can snowball in a hurry.
Ecuador ticks up a hair to 25%, but look at that ask depth. 726K stacked like a five-man backline, so rallies get smothered fast. The draw remains the home favorite for traders with that chunky 0.44 bid, basically a magnet price. Draw just took the lead to 51% and the spread widened to 50-51. Classic risk-off drift as traders pay up for the stalemate. Ecuador's bid slipped to being 2-3 with thinner depth, so any push is like attacking uphill into a packed box.
He goes long, launches it into the mixer, but Brozo climbs a little too eagerly and the whistle kills it. That's a cheap way to hand momentum back, and the crowd groans like they've seen that movie before.
Big story here is liquidity just evaporated. Draw bid depth collapsed to 30K and the top bid is basically dust 8.01. So this tape can gap on a single decent order. When the book gets this thin, it's like playing on an icy pitch. One slip.
Ivory Coast try to work it, but Ecuador shuffle the pieces. Ordonez tucks in, Perozzo drops alongside Pacho, and suddenly it's a different picture. The shot from range gets smothered. Galindez says mine and boots it away to reset the heartbeat. Lada's on the gallop now. Pachiando trying to link it up. Ecuador sniffing a little space at last. One clean touch here and it could open like a door in a storm. And it flips instantly. Catala Sosa drives it. Daniello and Moroso swarming like bees around the ball. That's the kind of transition that makes defenders' legs feel heavy in a hurry.
And just like that, liquidity snaps back, draw bid depth rebounds to 150K with that 0.44 line reappearing, so the market's found its footing again. Ecuador still has a massive sell side wall overhead, so sentiment says contain and counter, not all out. Draw keeps grinding higher, now to 2% with YF2 pricing, so the crowd's parking the bus and daring either side to break it. Meanwhile, Ecuador is still staring at that huge 0.24 sell wall, so upside feels like trying to score through traffic.
Here they come again. Catala Sosa with the spark. Doniello buzzing in support. Moroso hovering like a shark smelling blood. This is getting stretched now, end to end, and one mistake could light the fuse. Ecuador just made those stabilizing tweaks. Preciato and Perozzo reshaping the backline. Feels like a risk-off move to protect the lead. Give me your portfolio rebalancing take. Are they hedging smart or killing their upside?
Draw's still priced at 51.52, but the bid depth just got yanked down under 100K, and the top bid sitting at 0.04 screams flimsy support. That's a thin midfield, one aggressive sell, and you can see a quick air pocket before real buyers step in.
Ecuador just can't get Capier involved, and it's all about possession swings. Feels like a market stuck in a range. How do you read these momentum shifts when one side keeps getting blocked and forced into throw-ins?
Totally, that's range-bound tape. Every push-up gets sold, and those throw-ins are like failed breakouts that reset the order book. When your playmaker's muted, volatility compresses until one clean transition finally breaks the channel.
This crowd's on a knife edge. 2 crossbars already. You can feel the stadium ready to explode. Give me your market volatility take. Is this match screaming breakout move or cruel correction?
2 crossbars is pure volatility compression. Market's coiling. But the order book screams cruel correction risk. Draw support is basically air, top bid 0.01, and asks are stacked, so one goal could gap prices hard.
Spot on. Feels like a coiled spring with no safety net underneath. One clean finish and it gaps straight through, but a miss could trigger that brutal snapback. Crowds the liquidity here, and it's getting thin.
Exactly. This is a low float market with high emotion, so one goal is a gap move, not a grind, and the book backs it up. Draw's support is basically a phantom bid, so if the tape turns, it's a fast correction. Draw's still the crowded trade at 55%, but it's a flimsy lead. Real bids aren't stacked where price is, so it can slip fast on one moment of chaos. Côte d'Ivoire has a bit more real money, near 0.21, while Ecuador looks like it could gap either way on thin support.
This match feels like a coiled market, tempo rising, chances stacking, and one precise decision could cause a massive swing. With goal difference looming, it's like earnings season. You don't just want a result, you want a statement.
Totally. This is late game earnings whisper territory. Everyone's positioned for the base case, but the statement move is what reprices the whole board. And with the draw so consensus, a decisive finish is the surprise beat that sparks a violent rotation.
This finish is like a coiled spring, Ivory Coast upping the tempo, Ecuador still dangerous on the break, and with goal difference looming, it feels like one moment could cause a real gap move in the group table. 2 crossbars, late game 1v1 wingers. This match feels like a coiled spring. One breakthrough could swing goal difference like a sudden gap move. Crowds ready for a breakout candle. Goal kick, but that deflection tells you everything. Those wide men are a constant headache, isolating fullbacks like it's playground football. Laid on one clean 1v1 and the whole stadium could erupt in a heartbeat. That's the danger zone defending. Inside the box, you can't lunge. You've got to shuffle and suffer, and Ivory Coast know it. They're feeding the wide men like it's a vending machine. Early ball whipped in. Keeper says, "Thank you very much," and suddenly the pressure valve releases. He's playing like he's got an extra lung out there, starting as a right back, but bursting on like a wing back with a point to prove. Every overlap lifts the crowd another notch, and you can feel the defenders getting twitchy when he revs up. He's nominally the right back, but he's moonlighting as a wing back and doing it with swagger. Every time he surges forward, he drags the whole block with him, and the crowd are feeding off it like electricity.
We're basically frozen here, draw pinned at 58-59 like a team killing the game in the corner, but the winner markets are sitting on air pockets. One VAR moment or set piece, and you'll see a nasty gap because there's just not much real bid underneath.
Listen to that Ecuador chant rolling around Philly like a drumline pushing them forward even in the heat. Hydration break 8-0, but don't let the scoreboard fool you. This one's been crackling with near misses and nervous moments. That Ecuador crowd is turning Philadelphia into a little slice of keto, and you can feel the players soaking it up. Still draw at the hydration break, but we've had enough close shaves to make both benches sweat more than the weather. Imo, you hearing this? We've gone from croissants to cashback active cash Visa, 2% on every touch. Give us the market take. Is that a steady blue chip return or just a flashy ad break?
That draw is now wearing a proper sell wall 8COI59. Big size sitting right on the offer. So the market's basically saying you can have it, but you'll pay up. Meanwhile, both teams' win prices are inching up together. Classic late game lottery tickets getting nibbled while every draw is still the favorite, but that 21.59 offer is getting thicker. Someone's happily supplying no winner all day, like a defender heading everything away, and that chunky bid showing up down at Saw at 1 screams, "There's a trapdoor if sentiment flips." Yeah, Leo, that backyard World Cup is pure capex creep. Lumber and labor are the two strikers that always run up the score, and permits are the VAR check you didn't budget for. The 2% cashback is pocket change against interest. Try financing it. We're seeing a little more real support creep into the win sides. Cote d'Ivoire and Ecuador both have chunky bids 8.19 now, so the late goal crowd is stepping onto the pitch. But the draw is still the heavy favorite with a massive supply overhead, so any break...
Nutella bringing in the roasted peanuts like a late super sub. Suddenly the snack game's got extra bite. But we got nothing is exactly how A00 feels when the sun's blazing and nobody wants to pull the trigger. Welcome in, and what a postcard from Philadelphia. The city's shining like a freshly cut pitch under the lights. You can almost feel the buzz in the air, like the crowd's about to roar before the first whistle. Listen to that, 67,000 packed in, a wall of yellow turning the stadium into a living, breathing banner. The noise alone can win you a tackle, and you just know the players feel that pressure in their lungs.
Big tell here, draw bid depth just thinned out hard while the ask wall 8059 stays chunky, so confidence in the stalemate is a bit less conviction and more default setting. If any momentum hits, the win sides can gap quicker because there's less cushion under the draw. Order book just went super thin. Draw bid depth collapsed and Ecuador ticked up to 0.21, Feels like a nervy final 10 minutes, one headline goal and prices can gap hard with no liquidity.
Absolutely, Amo. When the bid depth vanishes, it's like the midfield stops tracking runners. Suddenly there's acres of space and panic everywhere. That 0.21 tick is the crowd inhaling before a counterattack. One spark and it jumps 4 off the woodwork and still no net rippling. This match is flirting with chaos but refusing to commit. Now it's a set piece moment, everyone holding their breath as the delivery comes. No short option, so he whips it in and the near post guard does his job. Bang, away it goes. Now Ivory Coast try to spring it fast, but that cynical tug stops the break dead. That's a take one for the team booking all day.
Ecuador just picked up a full point or two on the tape, bid up to 0.23, 0.24, while Cote d'Ivoire slips to 0.9, 0.20, so money's rotating to the away side. But look at those thin bid depths. This is a fast...
This is the maddest kind of 0-0, posts rattling like they're paid to keep the ball out, and still we're waiting for that one flash of genius. Ecuador have tightened the bolts, Ivory Coast are hunting those That's a classic break glass foul. Take the yellow, kill the counter, live to fight the next phase. At 74 minutes, you can feel Ivory Coast turning the screw, and in a game like this, it'll take one wicked touch or one set piece to crack it. It's a scoreless thriller with the woodwork doing overtime. 4 times it saved somebody's blushes. Ecuador are defending like a locked vault. Ivory Coast are trying to pick it with pace and dribblers, and this corner feels like the next big swing.
Draw just firmed up to 0.59 to 0.60, and that's the market basically saying we're playing for penalties again. Ecuador gave back that little pop, back to 0.21 or 0.22, and with bid depth still skinny, any headline or in-game swing can move. We're seeing the draw get real support now. Bid depth rebuilt to about 62K, so the crowd's back to protect the point mode. Cote d'Ivoire and Ecuador are basically pinned around 0.9922.
Oof, that was nearly gift-wrapped. Great recovery, though, and Ivory Coast pounced right back on the loose ball. Conan's sniffing around like a striker in the stock market, buying low, selling high in the box. Hydration break now, and everyone's gulping air as much as water. Nearly a catastrophe at the back, but that recovery run was pure desperation defending, and Ivory Coast win it back in a flash. Conan's prowling, looking for that one. You can hear the crowd trying to lift them through these nervy touches. One slip, and suddenly it's a fire drill in the box. Here come the changes for Ivory Coast, fresh legs to keep the tempo, and now Paciando goes one-on-one. Can he spark the moment? That was a heart-and-mouth moment, one sloppy touch, and it's curtains, but the hustle saves them, and Ivory Coast nick it back. Conan's lurking like he can smell panic, and this hydration break is a timeout for the brains as much as the legs.
That's another nudge higher for the draw. Now 0.61, 0.62. And the bid depth snaps back near 87K, so buyers are defending that level like it's the top of the box. The win sides aren't getting any love, just drifting, which tells you the market's pricing no separation unless...
You can see the captain barking orders. Ecuador have had to soak it up, but they're tweaking things to choke off that left side threat. Luciato's brought a bit of bite, and now Ecuador break again. One clean pass inside, and this could turn nasty. Valencia's waving them on like a conductor. Ecuador have been under the pump, but those little adjustments are starting to show. Luciato's added some edge. Mana's run was begging for the ball, and here they come again. Danger building. Gulo near, and now Nicolas Pepe steps into the spotlight. Suddenly there's electricity in the air, fresh legs, fresh ideas, and Ivory Coast look like they've hit the reset button. If Pepe gets a yard, the whole stadium's gonna lean forward. Preciado's pace is doing double damage. He's not just a threat going forward, he's dragging Diawara back into his own half and stealing Ivory Coast's bite. Casado switches it, they work it to the byline, and it's hacked out, but Ecuador are knocking. Preciado's got Diawara on a leash right now. Every sprint pins him deeper and blunts that left side punch. Caicedo Sangare's that straight swap, park him next to Kessie, and suddenly the backline's got a bodyguard, and you've dodged the Fofana second yellow trap. And look at that, Kevin Rodriguez on as Valencia fades out. Ecuador want fresh running power to keep this...
Absolutely, Leo. This is a classic high beta, no follow-through tape. Tons of wicks, no close above the level. And you can see it in the book. Draw keeps getting bid, but liquidity's thin, so one clean finish is a gap move waiting to happen. Draw is getting steamrolled higher to 0.63, 0.64, and that's a pretty loud 0-0 vibes signal with nearly 100K backing it. Both sides are being marked down. Cote d'Ivoire, 17-018. Ecuador, Gaudamai, 9-0-20. So unless... Draw's still the captain here, 0.63, 0.64, and the bid depth just got even thicker, so momentum traders are piling into the stalemate narrative. Ecuador slipping to 0.18, 0.19 is a tell. Money's fading the upset and waiting for a draw. Price is holding 80.63, 0.64, but that bid depth just thinned from triple digits to about 80K, so the conviction's wobbling even if the scoreboard trade hasn't moved. If we see another liquidity pull, that's when the win sides can pop on even a small headline.
That's exactly it, Imo. When the market thins out, the pitch does too. Legs go heavy, minds go...
Exactly, Leo. After that many near misses, the crowd trades the sure thing and piles into the draw like it's a defensive shell. But with the bid side so thin, one goal is a breakaway that turns this calm tape into a full-on gap and go. Draw's getting even more expensive, 8, 0.65, 0.66, but look at that. Bid depth is down to 16K, and Ecuador's basically no bid at 1.4K, so this is a fragile lead. Feels like stoppage time with tired legs, one clean break, and the market gaps before...
4 crossbars and still 0-0 at 78. This is pure variance theater. If you're seeing draw money surge, it matches the on-pitch. How has it not gone in? Psychology. Teams tighten up, shots get snatched, and everyone starts fearing the counter more than chasing the winner.
Now we've got a real squeeze setup. Draw ticks up to 0.66, 0.67, but both sides suddenly show thicker bids. Money's bracing for a late twist. It's like both teams finally pushing lines up. Great for volatility, brutal if you're caught offside.
Beat tucks inside, and you can feel the tempo drop. Everyone's taking that extra touch, like the air's gone out of the stadium. Perozzo goes in the book, and Ordonez tries to spark it down the flank, but it's snuffed out before it can catch fire.
We're basically pinned here. Draw still swine 67.68 with a chunky bid stack, while both win markets are stuck in the mid-teens and feel like optionality. That's classic. Everyone expects 0-0, right until one sloppy clearance turns it into a highlight reel.
What a roar in Philly, 68,000, and they're still hungry for that moment. You can feel it shaking the turf. Diamande nearly slips the leash, but that final touch is a half-second late, and suddenly it's Caicedo snapping in like a bouncer at the door. Diamande's pass splits them like a magician's trick, but the finish to the move just won't arrive. One touch too many, and the door slams shut. And listen to Philly, 68,000 strong, begging for a winner, while Caicedo prowls and cleans up everything in midfield.
Draws push to 0.68, 0.69, but the big tell is liquidity draining on the win sides, both bids under 10K depth, so any late goal could rip those prices fast. This is a packed penalty box, everyone leaning one way, and one deflection changes everything. Draws now 0.71. Market's basically pricing no late winner as the base case, and you can feel the herd leaning into it. But with win side bids still thin, a single goal is a counterattack that blows up the whole book. Draws holding 0.70, 0.71, but the bid depth is rebuilding. Buyers are stepping back in to defend that level like a team protecting a one-goal lead. Meanwhile, both win sides are offered heavy and bid light, so upside there is pure breakaway.
Ecuador have just put the game in the freezer, smart, streetwise, slowing the rhythm and taking the sting out of Ivory Coast's pressure. Kessié clips Caicedo and you can sense the frustration. Then that long ball fizzles and the keeper says thank you very much and hugs it like a winning.
Draw just ticked up again to 0.71, 0.72. Momentum's with the stalemate trade, and you can see Ecuador getting marked down with that bid depth collapsing to under 7K. This is late game time wasting pricing, but it also means any surprise goal will gap the win markets.
Oh, that's the warning siren. Cristiano all alone with acres of grass, and the ball finds him clean. Diamande's distribution is pure velvet. Now it's about the finish before the defense scrambles back in panic. Cristiano's got daylight. How is he that free at this stage of the match? Diamande spots it and pings it in, and suddenly every defender's sprinting like they've just seen the red numbers on a trading screen. They're recycling it now, trying to calm the storm. Cristiano drops it off. Sangare keeps the metronome ticking, but the crowd's not buying patience. Those whistles are turning into a pressure cooker. You can feel the next mistake could explode.
Draws grinding higher to 0.72, 0.73, and Ecuador's been the one sacrificed, down to a 0.12 bid with almost no depth, so nobody wants to be the hero right now. This is the market parking the bus. If a goal comes, it'll be a full-on counterattack gap move.
He drives through like a battering ram, slips between three shirts. How's he still on his feet? And at the very last heartbeat, it's poked away. That's a goal-saving touch with ice in the veins. He bulldozes forward, wriggles through a crowd. This is chaos in the box. And just when you think it's curtains, a defender throws out a toe and snuffs it out at the death. Massive, massive intervention.
Ecuador bid depth just collapsed to 1.6K with top bid down at 0.01. Market's basically given up on a late winner and is crowding into the draw. Can you frame this like a team losing belief late, and what kind of on-field moment could flip that psychology fast?
Absolutely, Amo. That's a team whose shoulders have dropped. Everyone's settling for the point and the crowd sensing it. One lightning counter, a keeper spill, or a crunching tackle that ignites the stadium can flip belief in seconds, and suddenly
Draws pushed up to 0.74, and the book's getting tighter. Bid depth is rising while asks are thinning. Classic, closing out the match flow. Win markets are still ghost town thin on the bid, so if anything breaks late, it's a slip and score moment and prices will jump.
Diawande is pure electricity. He's got that street ball swagger. Two men clatter him and he still glides through on balance and hips like he's on rails. But Ecuador's defending there was panic stations, and Radonias comes flying in with a toe poke tackle that's worth a goal. Now, yeah, that sin bin minute is brutal in a World Cup moment. Your team's suddenly playing with a hole in the wall. Ivory Coast will smell it like sharks in the water and start throwing bodies forward immediately. That's a run that screams confidence. 19 unbeaten is a dressing room that expects to survive any storm. But one tight loss to Brazil shows the margins at this level are razor thin, and tonight's got that same knife edge feel. 19 unbeaten, that's a squad walking out like they own the place, swagger in the boots and calm in the head. But that one goal slip to Brazil is the warning label. One moment of madness and the streak evaporates in a heartbeat.
Draws now 0.75, 0.76, and the depth has flipped. More bids than asks. So buyers are leaning in like they smell the final whistle. Ecuador's sliding to Soca 1-0-12 with thin support, which tells you the crowd's basically
19 unbeaten is serious armor. This team's been living on belief and good habits for months, but that 1-0 to Brazil is the reminder that at World Cup pace, one lapse is all it takes to crack the streak wide open. Makasisi has built a fortress here. Maybe they don't score in bunches, but they'll defend like it's the last breath in their lungs. And Diawande at 19 is a live wire every touch, but Ivory Coast staying calm in possession now. You can feel the next punch coming.
Draws up to 0.76, 0.77, and it's basically a coin-operated machine now. Steady grind, no drama, just time decay doing the work. Côte d'Ivoire and Ecuador are both marked down with skinny bid depth, so a single goal-mouth scramble would rip. Draws marching to 0.77, 0.78, with bid depth now clearly on top, so the market's leaning hard into nil-nil vibes and paying up for it. Both sides are drifting lower and liquidity's patchy, which means if we get a late breakaway, it'll be a proper gap and go. Totally, Leo. When enforcement goes soft, everyone starts playing closer to the line, like traders widening risk limits the moment compliance looks away. It boosts tempo and chaos, and that's when one ugly challenge becomes the catalyst that flips the whole book. Draw just ticked up again, 20.790.8. Crowds piling into the park the bus trade, but the bid stack is still pretty thin. Meanwhile, Côte d'Ivoire is basically illiquid at the bid, so if momentum flips, it's a slip and slide move, not a gentle drift. Draws back to 0.79, 0.80, and the bid depth improved. Buyers are stepping in like a team protecting a one-goal lead, but Ecuador's bid depth collapsing to almost nothing is the tell. If they get a sniff of momentum, price will...
Oh, he's got to hit the target there. Free header, and he sent it sailing. But wait, the flag goes up for the corner. If it took a nick, that's a lifeline for Ecuador. And now the pressure cranks up another notch on this set piece. He's climbed like a salmon and just can't keep it down. What a let-off for the keeper, but it's a corner, so someone's got to touch on it. That far post run for Adonias was on, and Ecuador will fancy one more bite here. Imo, this feels like a last-minute set-piece lottery. One touch could swing everything. Give us your market-close analogy. Who's under pressure here, Ecuador or Ivory Coast?
Nailed it, Leo. This is stoppage time pricing with no liquidity. Ecuador's under more pressure because the bid depth is paper thin, so any positive touch gaps higher fast. Ivory Coast is cheap, but it's a ghost town.
It's taken a wicked nick, and suddenly it's pinball in the area. Heart and mouth stuff. Preciano refuses to let it die, keeps it bubbling, and now the defense is scrambling like traders in a flash crash. Singo's gone shoulder to shoulder and he stood his ground. Preciado's pleading, but the defender's having none of it. That's leadership at the back, cool under pressure, and in the end, it fizzles out to a goal kick. Ivory Coast breathe again.
Draws now down to A3 0.84 with bids outweighing asks. This is the market parking the bus and daring someone to score. Ecuador leaking to 0.07, 0.08 tells you the crowd's fading their comeback.
IMO, they've brought in that 10-cent.
Totally. It's like tightening the closing auction rules so nobody can stall the tape. Less gamesmanship premium, more continuous price discovery, and that usually boosts volatility because the clock can't be milked anymore. Draws creeping higher again, 0.84 or 0.85, but notice the bid depth just thinned. Confidence is up, conviction is not. Both sides are stuck at 0.07, 0.08 with those comical 0.99 sell walls. So any late goal is a...
We're deep into the 89th and you can feel the nerves. Preciado goes down in a heap and suddenly Ivory Coast have a launch pad from the throw. Ecuador nodded away, but it comes straight back like a boomerang and nobody's blinking now.
Leo, the book just flipped like a last-minute goal. Draw collapsed to 0.21 or 0.22, while Cote d'Ivoire is suddenly 0.77, 0.78, and Ecuador has no bids. Give us the on... That's the catalyst, like an earnings beat in the 89th minute. The whole book reprices instantly. You can see it in the... Absolutely. One turnover and it's a fast break to the basket and the market hits the repricing button. You'll see spreads widen and bids disappear on the trailing side because nobody wants to catch that falling knife. Yep, that finish is the whistle that starts the stampede. Everyone rushes to the same exit and the price gaps. You can feel the risk off on Ecuador. No bids, just offers, like a team down a goal launching hopeful balls forward.
Goal for Cote d'Ivoire. Samad finishes the move. That's the on-pitch trigger for the odds flip. Late breakthrough. Ecuador stunned. Draw basically wiped out.
Cote d'Ivoire's ripped to 0.90, 0.91. Classic late goal squeeze, and now everyone's paying up for certainty. Draws down at 6-7 cents with a mountain of offers, and Ecuador's basically no bid, which tells you panic's replaced hope in one whistle.
Goal! Ivory Coast strike late. Samad finishes the move after that break and the stadium just erupted. That's the trigger for your odds flip. Ecuador got caught scrambling in transition and paid for it.
Now nailed it, Leo. Classic super sub moment, like bringing on fresh legs in the 80th and the whole match tilts. You can see it in the tape. Cote d'Ivoire spreads stay tight while draw liquidity turns into a wall of sellers. That's crowd psychology in... Cote d'Ivoire's now 0.91, 0.92, and you're seeing the tug of war as depth has rebuilt, so late buyers are paying a premium and sellers are finally showing up. Draw and Ecuador are still penny stock territory, all offers and no real conviction bids.
IMO, there's your trigger. Ivory Coast just struck substitute impact. Calm side foot finish after that burst to break the line. Ecuador's backline sank, space opened, and the market's reacting like a stampede. Draw wiped out, Ivory Coast odds crashing.
Cote d'Ivoire's crept up to 92.93, but notice the sell side is stacking. 130K of asks versus 66K bids, so upside from here is like protecting a one-goal lead under heavy pressure. Draw and Ecuador are still basically dead money with those giant...
IMO, Ivory Coast just nicked it late. Sub makes the difference. 1-0 vibes, 6 minutes of stoppage left. Give me your late winner market analogy in one punchy line.
Absolutely. Late winner markets are like a 90th minute goal. The spread snaps shut, liquidity vanishes, and anyone still fading, it is basically defending a corner with no keeper. Now it's full park the bus pricing. Cote d'Ivoire.
6 minutes, maybe 7 now, and you can feel Ecuador throwing the kitchen sink. Every long ball is a lottery ticket. Ivory Coast have to play it like a savvy trader, Amo. Protect the lead, no reckless risks, because one sloppy challenge.
Cote d'Ivoire is still pinned 80.92, 0.93, but the story is that ask side is 3.5 times the bids, tons of profit taking, not a lot of fresh conviction. The draw's got a tiny bid pop, but it's still swimming against a massive sell wall. Win odds are drifting up to 93%, but price won't budge off Zurich 92, Shar 0.93. That's a market saying, we believe it, but we're not paying extra. Meanwhile, the draw creeping to 10% feels like stoppage time nerves. Tiny bids, huge offers, and everyone bracing for one. There's the squeeze. Ivory Coast finally ticks up to 0.93, 0.94 as the ask wall thins, so late buyers are forcing the market up like a team winning second balls in stoppage time. Draw stays offered heavy, which tells you the crowd still isn't buying the equalizer narrative. Ivory Coast is holding that 0.93 or 0.94, but the real tell is the draw just got marked down to 0.06, 0.07 while the ask stack explodes. Market's basically waving play on and refusing to price the late equalizer. Whoa, Ivory Coast just got air pocketed down to wide side 0.91, even with 94% odds, and bid depth evaporated. That's not fundamentals, that's liquidity pulling like a keeper slipping on a wet pitch. Draw spreads wider, 0.08, 0.01. Big momentum swing. Ivory Coast implied drops to 85% with price 0.8485. Draw jumps to 19% with wide 0.1518. Feels like a late equalizer threat or red card vibe. Can you add match context psychology on what kind of on-field?
Absolutely, Amo. Those odds wobble when the defending side starts looking nervous. One mistimed clearance, a cheap foul near the corner, or a keeper taking ages and inviting pressure. Stoppage time turns legs to jelly, and every set piece feels like... This is exactly the kind of moment that spikes the draw price. Late corner, bodies everywhere, tired legs, one flick on or scramble, and it's chaos. Ivory Coast can't switch off. Set piece defending now is pure psychology under pressure, like holding a lead in a volatile...
Absolutely. This is the last 5 minutes trade where one messy bounce rewrites the tape. You can see it in the draw widening and Ivory Coast slipping 2-0, 84, 0.85. Liquidity's backing away like defenders on a yellow, terrified of a cheap. And just like that, the favorite snaps back to 0.94 or 0.95, momentum reclaimed, and the ask side is basically empty, only 8.5k sitting there. Draw gets crushed back to 0.06, 0.07 with almost no bids. That's
Still time, all right. This is where corners turn into chaos and heroes get minted in a heartbeat. Ivory Coast have to win the first header and the second ball because Ecuador are loading the box like it's a last roll of the dice.
now it's full park the bus pricing. Ivory Coast up at 0.97, 0.98, and the draw's been absolutely relegated to 0.03, 0.04. But notice the books still chunky on both sides, so one surprise event and this thing can gap like a bad...
Keeper's brave there. Two hands, no nonsense, and that could be the moment that kills the comeback stone dead. Now Ivory Coast can breathe and break, and if Diamandi gets running into that space, Ecuador are in real trouble. Lupana's timing is perfect, comes through traffic like he owns the air, and suddenly Ecuador's last gasp looks spent. That outlet ball wide is clever too. Diamand in space is a fire alarm for tired legs. That's the keeper's moment of authority, claims it clean, and you can feel the stadium deflate for Ecuador. And now the counter is on, one good touch into Diamand's path, and it's curtains because those defenders are running on fumes. This is pure survival football now. Singo's throwing his body at everything, and you can hear the clock ticking like thunder. One last shove forward to Boney, and that's the release valve. Just don't give away a silly free kick. That's the nightmare.
We've hit the no offers zone. Ivory Coast is bid at €99 with zero ass depth. That's basically the market saying the trophy's already on the bus. Draw and Ecuador are stranded at a penny ask with no bids, so the only real risk left is a freak bounce in stoppage time.
They're squeezing every drop out of this. Rosciato tracking back, Singo slamming the door, and Ecuador just can't find the key. Get it to Boney, win a throw, win a foul, anything, because 3 points are right there trembling on the edge.
Ivory Coast is still pinned 87.99 with no offers. Buyers are basically writing the final whistle into the price, and bid depth just jumped to 163K. The only tell is Ecuador finally showing a microscopic bid.
The clock is Ecuador's biggest opponent now, and you can feel the desperation rising with every touch. Mordonia hears that roar. Go on then, throw the kitchen sink, but one loose pass and Ivory Coast will sprint into acres like it's a training drill. That scoreboard is screaming at Ecuador now. Every second feels like sand slipping through their fingers. Mordonia is getting dragged forward by the crowd's roar, but it's a tightrope. One mistake